You are listening to Are We There Yet?, the podcast at the intersection of sustainability, technology, and communication. I'm Jamie Hardy.
And I'm Sonja Ernst.
Our guests today, Caroline and Vincent Jeanteur, are partners in both work and life and in shaping the future of leadership. Caroline's expertise is in helping executives align purpose, strategy, and impact to build resilient, meaningful organizations. Vincent works at the intersection of consulting, coaching, and training to support leaders and teams in clarifying their vision and strengthening their leadership. After decades in the field shepherding companies through delicate change management, they've co-founded Emergentiel, a consulting firm nestled among the vineyards of Vouvray, France, that uses principles from permaculture and sociodynamics to guide leadership renewal. Together, they offer a rich perspective on leading with purpose, clarity, and resilience. Welcome.
We're so excited to talk to you about permaculture first. Principles of permaculture, the idea of permaculture. This season, our third season, is focusing on permaculture. And we would like to learn more about, Vincent, this is more a question for you as a consultant and a trainer and a coach. You implement the idea of permaculture into business. Tell us a little bit about permaculture and how that relates to business.
Oh, that's a vast question. Basically, permaculture is a design tool, which means that using permaculture, you will set a kind of framework that can help you design and organize things. For instance, a business, a team, the way you interact with customers, with your stakeholders, etc. We discovered permaculture a few years ago. It was Caroline which introduced me with permaculture, actually. For me, it was like an epiphany because I think many principles of permaculture can be, and if I may, should be translated into the way we make business and the way we work together. First, there are ethics. It's a matter of ethics. There are three pillars, three very clear principles which help you design anything you do. As far as permaculture is concerned, it has something to do with, take care of the earth, of the soil, make sure that you treat people well, if I can say, and make sure that you share everything when you have too much or too many elements, and make sure that you share them with other people. So in a way, that means consider the environment, the world you live in with, and be very cautious with what you do with all the natural resources. Obviously, act in a very human way, in a very respectful way with your stakeholders, with the people you meet. And third, don't overproduce. Don't try and produce too many products, too many concepts, etc. Because if you do so, there is a risk that you will waste energy, waste resources. And if you happen to have too much of a production, then you should share everything that you have with your people you meet and you have around you. And I think, okay, it can sound a little naive in the way we do business, actually, but I think it's a very good, like, a lighthouse for a boat. It's a very good way of making sure that you don't overinvest in a direction, or that you don't waste resources or your time or your money or others people's energy. And so it's a way of preventing you from wasting, resources. So that's the three principles. And then you've got 12 design principles, because permaculture is a designing tool, as I said, and it's very helpful. It's a very strict, but also very helpful framework, which helps you to design any kind of activities. Obviously, it's very useful when you grow vegetables, or if you try to have, let's say, fruits or things like that from a garden. But you can also apply those principles in any kind of human activities, and let's say in business. Yes, it's a very helpful framework which prevents you from wasting energy, from over investing in a direction, from ignoring other people. And let's say it is also, I think, very helpful to reconnect the people, the stakeholders, the customers that you are in contact with. So in terms of business, to come back to your questions, for instance, if you want to design, let's say, a training program, it's a very easy to use tool to make sure that you don't forget any topic, any stakeholder, any tool that you've already developed, for instance, instead of rushing into something new, into trying to connect with new technologies or ideas, which can be relevant, but which are not necessarily relevant and which lead you maybe to waste time, energy, relationships, past relationships, etc.
Vince, when I'm thinking of this 12 principles, I envision like a full circle of actions that are taking place. So if I'm thinking of permaculture in nature, it is something that goes over a long period of time where I observe my space for a year or longer. I see the interactions of different plants. When I'm looking at the organization, I observe the organization for a certain period of time. And then there's all these different principles that play a role together. If I was in an organization, could I say, okay, I'm just going to pick these 3 principles, any given 3 principles, and focus on those and ignore the rest of those? Or do you believe that all the principles play a role together and it's tough to take them apart here?
Okay, obviously you can choose and concentrate on certain principles because they are maybe easier to translate into your business, into your environment. But my recommendation would be that you take all the 12 principles into account, even if sometimes some of them are not really obvious, to implement in your business or in the way you do business, because what is very, I think, important to remember is that those principles build a framework, and it's very powerful, very useful to connect and to combine as much principles as you can, because it will be even more robust, which is a term that we like with Caroline. We prefer to say robust more than efficient, because we try to design some things that works and that will work on the long run, in the long run, that will be robust and that will be able to adapt to match with as many situations as possible. So my advice would be that you try and take as many principles as possible into account.
Caro, have you also experienced this? And do you have any favorite principles that maybe you start with and then the other ones follow from there?
Yes, I think that my favorite is the first one, that it could be the biggest framework, I would say, or the one that you can apply every time. It's observe and interact. Because when you are working with an organization, if we are talking about applying permaculture to management, for example, this is the first thing that you have to do. You have to read the landscape as you are reading your garden and seeing how things goes together. And I think that you are never inventing something from scratch. You are always starting from what exists, and you have to respect it. And there is a famous theory in France called mental models when you are thinking about change management. And it explained, and I used it when I started working on the purpose of my company. You have something here, which is the way people are thinking and doing things for years. And if you want to do differently, or if you want to express what animates people in the company, you have to go from that. It's not something from the outside. It's something that is already here, and you have to describe and discover. That's why it's very important to observe first. And I think that the key of this principle is the fact that we're talking about observing, of course, but also interacting, because sometimes your observation can be wrong, or you may feel that you have understood, but you didn't. So the good thing is, once you have observed something, you interact to make sure that you have well understood, in fact. when you want to try something different, it's really about starting a first thing and see how it happens. And then what happens after doing this thing and see if it's worth going more and more or stop and do something else. So I think that the fact that you are observing on one side and interacting on the other is very important. And when we are talking about permaculture, for example, when we started working on this concept of permaculture with Vincent, we were living in Paris and we didn't even have a small garden. So it was a lot about books and readings, but we didn't really try things. What I really think is interesting in when we start experimenting it in Vouvray, in our garden, because you read the principles in the book, but it's not exactly the same when you apply them in the house with your hands. And I know that I had a mantra when I was talking about innovation in my company, which is open your mind, and it's about theory and reading things. Open your heart, and it's about the emotional aspect of it, and open your will, and it's about acting. So I think that observe and interact are really at the core of everything that you have to do when you are trying to make things happen or to change things in an organization or a garden. So that would be my favorite principle.
Vince, do you have a favorite principle?
I'm not sure, but maybe it would be integrate instead rather than segregate, because as a consultant and as a coach, I used to work on what we we call in France social conflicts. Tense and conflicts inside the organization. It can be tense inside a team or tense inside a company, leading to conflicts, to strikes, etc. I think that many conflicts occur because in France, that's what I think we learn at school, but we learn to segregate things instead of integrating them. And for instance, many people believe that you cannot be in favor of something and at the same time to have some, let's say, some reluctances regarding the way the project will be led, for instance. So you have to be in favor or against something, which is very basic, very simple as far as the human relationships are concerned. I think it's very important that we take all the liberties that we have, all the freedom that we have inside the human relationships, because when you discuss with somebody, let's say with a teammate or a colleague or a customer, you can bring your own point of view, but there's always something that you can get from theirs. It's very important, I think, in the way, for instance, executive teams work. Okay, obviously the CEO has a specific range of responsibilities, chief marketing officer, chief finance officer, etc. They all have a specific range of responsibilities. But when discussing a topic together, when trying to take different point of views into account, and obviously you can get to, I think, to a better solution or to a more robust solution than when you try just to make sure that it is 100% the point of view of the marketing officer and 100% point of view of the finance officer, etc. And I don't know how it is, let's say, in the US, but in France, I think it would be a huge improvement in the way the companies work if people were able to discover and to realize you can be at the same time in favor and a little bit also against a project. It's not an issue as long as you are bold enough to say, okay, I agree with this part, I disagree with this part. And when I disagree, it doesn't mean that we have to fight and to start a conflict. I used to work with executive teams and at the same time with labor organizations, union organizations. And when you take the time to remove all the way people are used to behave when they meet each other, etc., then you realize that the vision can be the same, the purpose can be the same. They agree on the key purpose of the organization, which is, to my mind, which is the most important part. So that would be my favorite one.
It brings me back to one of my favorite principles, which is diversity. And I just have to think about how diverse personalities interact in different ways and how that plays a role in conflict resolution, which comes back to what you just said. Caro, when you think of your experience in the organization and implementation of permaculture principles in business, are there some best practices that you can share? Are there some examples that you would like to share with us today?
Yes, and they might be related to some principles, but what Vincent just said about integrate rather than segregate for me is also one of my favorite principles. And I think that when you are trying to assemble a team, I'm working in the video game industry. So when you start a project, we build something that we call a core team, which is supporting the creative vision of the game. And this team is composed of very different talents. You have the creative ones, you have the technical director, which is in charge of technology. You have also the producer who is in charge of counting people and budget. And all of these work together. And what I feel really interesting is that, for example, in the video game industry, art is always challenging technology and technology is challenging creation. So it's really about building the good condition for this dialogue that Vincent was explaining before. And for this, I have one best practice. We tested it in some core teams, and I also used them when I did a workshop 2 months ago. It's about setting the right social field for this kind of dialogue to happen. And it very often starts with exposing your vulnerabilities, which means we start by showing others, of course, what you are good at, your strength, but also where you are weak, in fact, and the kind of vulnerability that others could complement. It's very difficult because it's suppose that you build on a very trustful environment. So, and usually the best thing to do is for the leader to take the lead on that and show his or her own vulnerabilities first, because then the other will come. But when you manage to do that, when you manage also to expose the hidden agenda of everyone, especially when you are building a team, sometimes there is one which would love to be the leader of that, but is not. So if you are able to show this, and usually it takes a coach or at least someone who will do the work, then you start with a very good social field to build this kind of dialogue and constructive conflict. So I would say that one best practice is to start by installing this kind of environment before starting the team. And we used to say that to have a good core team, we need to have shipped a project, a game, which means at least 2 or 3 years of working together through the hurdles of video game development, which is a real roller coaster with very high and very low as well. And when we do that at the beginning, we manage to build a core team from scratch in a way, instead of having to have this full cycle of development to make sure that people are able to fight and to get in conflict and stay alive and keep their relationship. So I think this could be one best practice. I'm thinking of another one, which is about the principle we say use ages and value the marginal. And I've been working in strategic innovation for 20 years. And I know that this principle is very useful for me because innovation is a lot about hybridation, which means you take something somewhere and you bring it to your business or your activity, and suddenly it's a big innovation, but it was not on the other parts. And I think that there are a lot of things that are happening on the edges. And if you want to be really innovative in your company, you have to look there. Today, I think there is a lot of innovation happening, for example, in Africa or in India with frugal innovation, for example. When you look at what is happening in Detroit in the US after the big recession, it's really interesting. So it's really about looking other places that you will be looking naturally. And for example, when I was in charge of strategic foresight for my company, I said, okay, video game industry, technology, entertainment, we have all the company looking at that. I will look somewhere else and bring this knowledge to my company. So I think that when you are thinking about innovation, it's really important to look there instead of being focused on your industry, because you will do more of what you already do, but you will not see the very special things that could really change the way you are doing things or thinking about your business.
That's my favorite principle.
Oh,
actually.
good.
So when you're coaching leaders, this is a question for both of you. How do you change a mindset for somebody who maybe thinks they know it all, or they've done it all already, or they're a veteran? How do you get them to observe and interact, or maybe make a slow and small solution when they want to make a big decision on something? How do you convince them? How do you cultivate this mindset with them?
Okay, that's a fantastic question, and I think there are different ways of answering these questions. Some things that we are trying to do here in Vouvray, where we have settled our company, is that we want people, to experience how nature is working, if I can say, is living, is regenerating itself. And so we've got a garden where we grow vegetables, flowers, fruits, etc. We've got a little forest, and we've got, since this year, we've got an orchard, so a place where fruits grow. We love to take the leaders to different places in our garden so that they can take time and consider the same things from different point of views. And after this experience, which is if I may say, a real life experience, we use, coaching questions, which means open questions with no trying not to induct anything in any direction, and ask them how they feel and what they discovered by, looking at the same landscape from different point of views. Surprisingly or not, I don't know, but it's a very powerful question. We love to do this also with an executive team, let's say a team, any kind of team, it's not important, but to have them to look at the same landscape from the same point of view and to share what they have just observed. Surprisingly, when you have, let's say, 5-8 people looking at the same landscape, all of them, okay, they see the same landscape, but all of them notice something different, which is relevant for them. And by sharing these observations, they reinforce the relationship with the rest of the team, and people love to discover some very specific point in the landscape that they had not noted. So my first answer would be, okay, let's try it in real life, and then let's try to, to translate this discovery into the business life, and to realize that we can, just as Caroline said, we can look at the same issues, the same business problem with different glasses, different eyes, and to discover different aspects.
When we were thinking about a project in Vouvray, we were thinking about something that will reconnect the person coming to himself. You are in the nature, in the garden, and it's a good way to reconnect with yourself and then to reconnect with others. So it was really about reconnecting with living world and yourself and the others. So I've been trained with the Palo Alto systemic approach for coaching, and I strongly believe in something that they call, emotional experience that will correct the way you see things. This is what we are trying to do in our garden. And as a coach, this is also something I will try to do with my clients to make sure that they do this step aside that will help them, for example, if they are very rational, to connect with emotional, or I've been trained also by Robert Dills on somatic coaching. You are using your body, and sometimes you have to have a good trustful relationship with your coach to do that. But sometimes using different ways of approaching a problem, like, walking to see the solution, could be something interesting. I also remember one time my client have a big change program, and he wanted to convince everyone that it was the best way to go and that this program will change their lives forever. I think that when we are thinking about change management projects in companies, usually we want to convince people that's the way to go and that will be better, great, and wonderful. But everyone knows that change is difficult and that you have obstacles on the way. So my suggestion to him was, okay, this program is really important for you. You want to go there and you want to have your teams go with you on this project. But there are many drawbacks for them to go there because they will have to change things. It will be sometimes worrying and so on. So instead of saying that's a great project, it's wonderful, it will change your life, start with telling them that you want to do this project, that you will do it. There is no question. Make sure that they understand what you want to do first, and then work with them on all the drawbacks. At first, he was a bit reluctant, not being sure that it was a good way to go. But since he trusted me and he was, I think, a bit worried about the way his project will be accepted by his teams, he said, okay, I will try. And he tried, and it was really wonderful because people, by working on the drawbacks, start to find solutions, and they were much more engaged than they would have been if he had done it the usual way, I would say. And then he came back on the next session and he told me it was wonderful. Now, each time I have a change project, I will start by questioning the obstacles and the thing that it will change for people, which doesn't mean that you say, I won't do the project. It's just about a way to present it and make sure that people are heard. And when they are heard about the hurdles they see, then they become solution oriented, in fact. So that was a big emotional experience for him, and it works well.
It brings that thought that when we tell people in the change process to do something and they don't do it the way we want them to do, and then we keep saying, do it this way, then they're part of a problem. But people don't want to be a part of the problem. They want to be a part of the solution. And if they're engaged, then they create the solution and they can be heard. I love that. That's a great example. Thank you, Caro. I was going to ask you about something as we were talking about this. What comes to mind is we're looking at this world and artificial intelligence is changing significantly how we do business, how we interact with each other. So, how can companies leverage permaculture in this world of technology that replaces possibly roles, that it replaces humans? How can we still focus on that sustainable approach while keeping in mind that new technology is going to change the world?
I would say that we can use two things. One would be the principle obtain a yield because it helps questioning the meaning of what you are doing. And I think that with these new tools, we can do everything. For example, from my point of view, we have already a lot of content, and a lot of it is not good content, but we now have a tool to bring even more content. So if we ask ourselves, what is the yield? What is the thing that we'd be really happy to produce in terms of content? Then it's a good way to question the way we want to use technology. I remember that we had already this with data at the beginning. When we start to have machine learning and so on, we can have lots of data of everything. And then sometimes instead of asking which data I need to do this, you are asking for a lot of data. And then you are completely drawn by data and you don't know how to use them. So I think that this principle, obtain a yield, can be something good, which is, okay, I have this wonderful technology, generative AI and so on, but what do I really need? What is the meaning of all that? That would be probably the first principle I would use to think about it. And the second one would be probably about integrate rather than segregate. And it's about finding the right place for human in this story, because technology is a new actor. We can use it. Human beings have been using tools for a long time and trying to enhance themselves with tools, with technology. So it's not bad by itself, but we have to integrate rather than segregate, which means to give humans the real place and where it should be, and see how technology can be, it's one plus one equals three. How can, by using this technology, be better humans, in fact. So if we think like this, I think we can address the problem with less risk than saying, okay, that's the new the new thing, that we have to go very fast and very quick, not thinking about what we really want to get out of it and what the place of human people inside.
When I think about permaculture and the business world in the light of change, I always think of how can we catch and store energy and use and value resources. Because to me, these two principles apply to the organizations. They have so many resources that bring tradition, and bring knowledge, collective knowledge of experience and experience of the organization. So these things we have been growing in the organizations. We want to keep them. It is expensive for the organizations to lose that experience and knowledge. So, how can we leverage the reskilling and upskilling ideas to keep that knowledge and experience in those organizations so that we can continue to generate revenue and bring yield? That would be my 2 cents.
We were just talking about artificial intelligence, and I think that LLM are great ways to make use of that knowledge. You build this kind of chat box with this LLM, and they store all this intelligence, and they can give them back. You ask question in natural language, and then they go and search throughout the data and documents and give you the knowledge back. So this is a good way of using artificial intelligence to build on all that knowledge.
The other thing that you mentioned earlier, Caro, that I really loved was connect with self and others. And I'm going to go back to technology again and humans. To me, this is important. And as we're thinking of these permaculture principles, where we're part of something bigger, we're part of the circle of life, right? How do we humans can stay connected to ourselves? Because with technology, what we observe often is that the new leaders, the new generations coming up, they use technology so much to communicate with each other. There is a delay in communication. That human connection is weakening over time because all the technology is very helpful, useful, and is being used. And therefore, that human interaction starts to take the second position, the backseat. And so now what I observe often is that when young leaders go into organizations and they have teams to lead, and the first time they have to talk to their team in person, it causes so much anxiety. And so in my mind, what you presented, talking about permaculture as being a part of something that brings us back to pause, to stop, to connect with ourselves, and therefore with others too, is an added value in this process. When you think of that, Vince, do you see permaculture helping organizations in this change? Because technology will change organizations. And I know you have enormous experience in change management, helping organizations through change management.
For me, a great discovery based on permaculture, which can maybe sound obvious. For me, it was really important, was the importance of time. And by time, I mean when you try and grow vegetables, for instance, there are specific tasks that you have to accomplish by a certain period of the year. And if you don't, then you haven't, and it's too late. And on the other side, you can't catch the time that you've lost, and you cannot accelerate the way your garden is blooming, is flourishing, etc. You have to deal with life, with nature, and with the pace of things. And I think it's a very good lesson, in business, because we tend to forget that we are living persons. We are part of the universe, part of the nature. We tend to say with Caroline, okay, in the companies, every day it's the first day of spring, It's like it was summer all the time. There is no winter, there is no fall. You can work during the night, you can grow projects. It is like if you were able to do anything anytime. But in fact, it's not the case. And as human people, we need to reconsider what we are doing, the time we spend working, the energy we tend to invest or to waste on the different projects that we have at work. And I don't know if it's answering your question, but I think it's very important that we reconsider that even if we have artificial intelligence, very powerful tools at the moment, as Caro said, a big amount of data and too much information that we can deal at the time. We have maybe to step back and spend 1 or 2 minutes just breathing and reconsidering the purpose of what we are doing, the people that we have the opportunity to work with, and the way we are going to deal with this project. And if we go back to AI, we've got 3 kids together with Caroline. Our son is just 19 and is very good at collecting information and making a synthesis of this, which is, I think, a very important skill. You can read articles, read books, etc., and then, identify what is relevant and make a very short and insightful notice based on what you've read. And AI is excellent at this kind of exercise. I think it can identify and spot on the very important topics. And my question, I don't want to say my fear, because I don't want to reject technology just because it's technology. But there is a risk, I think, that the new generation won't learn how to do this. And so they will get used, just to gathering as many articles, books, informations, topics, data, etc., and just ask any any artificial intelligence just to identify what is key in this topic, etc. And the problem will be that they will lose their own way of judging what is relevant, judging if it is really relevant or it's just ChatGPT or another one which says that it is relevant. After that, that's exactly all the skills that I think that good leaders need, which is to identify and concentrate on what seems to be relevant, important, meaningful, etc. And that you have to identify by yourself, I think, in accordance with your values, with your beliefs, with your purpose, etc. If you ask an artificial intelligence to do it, maybe it will be relevant. I'm not certain. But what I know is that you will lose or at least forget how to do so. And I think it's very important, maybe 10 or 12 times a day in all the little tasks of your life, with your teammates, obviously, with your company, but also with your partners in life and with your children, with your friends, etc.
Vince, I can tell you what you're just saying is very close to Jamie's heart.
Yeah, that's a radical concept. Good luck to convincing people, because it's very hard. And I wonder, are there any limitations to using the permaculture framework? What limitations have you found in your practice?
So far, I haven't identified any limitation, because we are relatively new. If we want to be honest, it's been 4 years since we really have started to practice in our garden in Vouvray. So there are many adventures that we have not had so far. It can sound a little bit complicated for people, because this framework is rich, is complicated, 12 elements that you have to combine or try to combine. But the main obstacles that I see at the moment, again, is related with time, I think, with how people consider time. We mentioned the seasons a little bit earlier, the way that in a garden, you need winter, you need fall, as much as you need spring and summer, because the soil will rest, will regenerate, will collect and accumulate energy during all the seasons. And I think that people and maybe businesses at the moment are really stressed by what they identify as a necessity to be faster, to change concepts, to change products, etc., faster and faster. Caro, what would you say?
I think about two main things. The first one is scaling. I mean, permaculture talks about small scale solutions, and it works well when you are looking at with these lenses. But when you are thinking about big companies, multinational, it starts to be very difficult to scale. So this is one question for me, even if for permaculture as an agriculture form, how to make sure that we are able to scale it. And it's probably through something like decentralization, multi-local, instead of having a huge, big multinational company, for example. So this is the first question, and I'm playing with it right now. And I know that I have some difficulties in my job because of that, because I try to apply permaculture in a big international company. And sometimes it's difficult to have organic deployment when you have so many people and you need something which is much more processed. And the second one, it has to do with the time as well. Measurement. When you are obtaining a yield in a garden, it's very simple. It's a tomato, a radish. It's something very tangible and concrete. And I think that in companies and in the world in general right now, you try to have KPI on everything, but KPI are not yields. And sometimes you are focusing on KPIs instead of focusing on the real yield. And since everything is led by numbers, you have to find numbers on yield. And when you are talking about impact, about human people, it doesn't go very well with numbers. And so this is something which is difficult to project on companies and on the way the world is leading today by numbers, because you are starting to talk about meaning, about what is yield for me when you're talking about an organization. It's not easy to put it in numbers, and it's not easy to make it work with existing measurements and KPIs. So it's sometimes difficult to prove based on the way people are proving things today.
These are some great topics, Caro, that you're bringing up. I love them. And I fully agree with that. People cannot be numbers. And the KPIs are sometimes very, very difficult to align with the real yield. That is where people feel disconnected. What is my contribution to the organizational success? And it's very difficult to see because I'm being measured on A, but I'm really accomplishing this. Meaning, for example, I'm a customer service and my customers are very happy if I take time to talk to them and connect with them and provide personalized service. But I'm being measured on how many customers I see a day, which means I cannot see every customer and take the time that I need to take. So this is like a conflicting goals that we're having. And I can see that in many organizations, they're struggling with just that, aligning those KPIs with real yield. So as we're approaching the end of our conversation today, we always ask our guests a question at the very end. Are we there yet? And the question is, how do you interpret that question? And what are your thoughts on it?
It's a very powerful coach question. As far as permaculture is concerned, we are nearly there yet. For me, it was a great discovery when we arrived in Vouvray. Okay, Vouvray is a small city in the middle of France. And as Caro mentioned, we left Paris to live in Vouvray. And I think that many people at the local level of Vouvray are already experiencing or implementing permaculture principles in the way they live, in the way they work, and maybe more important, in the way they interact with their neighbors, with their colleagues, etc. Much more than in big cities like Paris, for instance. I think that in small towns in France, maybe also in the US, people dedicate more time and more attention to their neighbors, to their friends and families than they do in the big cities. Maybe it's because of the way you are forced to live in big cities. You spend time in trains, in buses, etc., and you have the stress of being so many people on a small on a smaller location. But yes, I think that all the principles that we mentioned, they live and they work at local level. For instance, observe and interact. People take care of each other in small villages. We were very surprised and we were delighted by the way we were greeted when we moved into our house. The people from our street, it's a little street, were all very friendly, wanted to make sure that we felt well at home, etc. We observed that people take care of elderly people, many small attentions, small proofs of, that the social link still exists and is very important. So that would be the first one. Another one is, again, I think related with time. People take time to live, or many people take time to live, take the time to live and to fancy their life in Vouvray, much more than in big cities such as in Paris. Take time just to go for a small walk, to stop in the local cafe and, I don't know, share a beer with a neighbor, etc. I think that's mostly a matter of, of relationships, of the way we interact with other human beings, our neighbors, our friends. And I think it will be the best way to deal with conflicts. We see many conflicts emerging at the moment in our societies. I think it's the same in the US. This way of, observing, interacting, using small and slow solutions, etc. I think if you realize that this is part of the permaculture framework, maybe we can say that, okay, this permaculture model or inspiration can be successful.
I would say I'm not sure that I would be very happy to be there yet because there will be nothing else to do. So I would say that we are not there yet, but that we are in a pretty exciting time right now because there are many things to reinvent. It will probably go with some big difficulties and we will have obstacles to surmount, but I'm looking forward for the journey to get there. And there is something else which relate to what Vincent just said. It's about proximity, or I would say once people have tasted it, they want it, they crave for it. So the question is how to make sure that as many people as possible can taste these new ways of thinking, doing things, because once they did, then they want to get there and to embark on the same journey to get there.
I love that. Thank you both. We really appreciate your time today and your insights and your experience. Thank you for sharing this with us. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
When I think about our conversation now, my focus goes on to a couple of things that are around oneself and the time aspect. Caro mentioned connect with self and others, and we're not taking the time to do that. We're not stopping to watch the snow fall. And I had to think about the burnout effect, that the pressure and expectations that we set on ourselves, that the universe sets on us, can cause, right? So that burnout effect, to me, there's a direct correlation to the time aspect. Meaning, I see many people who are focused on delivering, executing. That by itself induces a very high speed of life. And with that high speed, there is no way to stop. And so, because of that, the burnout is just inevitable. And I feel that if we can find a pattern, if we can find a rhythm that can help us deliver excellent work while still having time, taking the time to slow down, then that balance, that interaction of speed and quiet and slow can bring the energizing moments.
Yeah, it was very revealing when Caro talked about the limitations of permaculture, because it's very much about time and relationships, and those two things take constant work to maintain. And in, multinational corporation world that we live in, they're in very short supply, both of them. And especially with permaculture, one of the principles is to use small and slow solutions. And those are the antithesis of what multinational corporations, governments, huge entities do. But I think that, like you say, we can find a balance. Maybe we realize that we can't find a balance, but we can try to balance as much as possible on a human scale. And it takes effort every day and reflection every day. And sometimes I find that slowing down, it makes my life more efficient, because I'm not doing all these other things that don't come to fruition or don't end up obtaining a yield or do anything for me. So sometimes doing it slow and correctly actually is the path forward.
There was another aspect that I wanted to bring up here. I was thinking about global organizations, international organizations, so hard to implement this big picture of permaculture in business and all of that. But then at the same time, maybe a path into that is not seeing this huge organization, but looking more at local ecosystems and helping those local ecosystems collaborate well with each other. Not only will that help us induce, drive that diversity benefit because of these different ecosystems, the experiences we can share, but also we can focus on the needs of that ecosystem and nurture it to help it grow within this huge global world, global organization.
I loved that Vincent brought his people that he was working with out into the physical field, and that they use that as the inspiration. Even though it's in one time and place, everyone saw something differently, and that is such a microcosm for how companies work together and relationships are built.
What a great conversation. Thank you so much for this, Jamie.
Thank you. See you next
See you next
time.
time.